Hey, so we just released a new log and VOD review channel in my Discord. Right now it's open to literally everybody. I don't know exactly what my future plans are with it. We might have it be like a Patreon only thing, or like what I was initially proposing is we have like everybody can read the channel no matter what and like see the different threads and see all the information in here, and they're not restricted to anything. It's just that Patreon supporters would be the ones who would be allowed to post in here and like ask questions or post their logs and get personal feedback, while everybody gets the benefit of just being able to like see the log reviews and take, information from them and learn that way. So let me know what you guys think. And right now we have it open to everybody, so like literally anyone can come in here and post a log or a VOD, and I will do a review thread on it. So while we have that going, just to test out the channel and see how people like it, come by and throw a log in here and see if you benefit at all from it, and let me know what you think. But this video is basically, I thought it would be a good subject after going over Xavier's logs here for Resto Druid, and I just wanted to cover like planning healing cooldowns for specific boss fights. So whether it be a boss fight that you haven't done yet and you're preparing for, or if it's a boss fight that you have done before and you maybe haven't killed it yet, like you're progressing on it, or you just want to do better when you go back into farm, whatever it may be, it's just what is our thought process on going in and preparing for a boss fight and really setting up our healing cooldowns to be as efficient as possible. The specific example being used is going to be Resto Druid, but this can apply to literally any healer ever. And depending on how long the video runs after we talk about Resto Druid, I might fit some other healers in here too and use them as examples in the same like format. So the first thing we're going to do is go to the boss that we're looking for and go to rankings. So I'm going to go to Lord of Dread. I'm going to go to rankings, and then we're going to change this to healing. And we can leave it on Mythic. You can set it to Heroic. It really depends just if there's any major changes from Heroic to Mythic, like timing-wise. But on Lords of Dread specifically, the timings are exactly the same no matter what difficulty. But if you want the most like pinpoint accuracy, I would recommend probably using whatever difficulty you're trying to do the boss on. So we're going to go to healers. We're going to go to Resto Druid because that's what we're looking at. And the thing that was talked about in this thread, which I'm going to go over here as well, is Xavier didn't run the 2-minute trank, which I showed in this thread. I'll just show it here. That literally almost everyone runs 2-minute trank. There's very few logs that you'll see pop up with Spring Blossoms. But because Xavier was using Spring Blossoms, I wanted to show an example of another Resto Druid using Spring Blossoms and how they were using their cooldowns compared to him. So we're going to go in here and just find the first Resto Druid that's using Spring Blossoms. I'm going to click on the log. I'm going to translate it over once it loads. And then what we do from here is we're going to go to damage taken, because what we're trying to find is what in the boss fight is causing the raid unavoidable raid-wide damage. We want to find those instances because that's where our cooldowns are going to be best used. That's where we want to, as a Resto Druid or as most healers in the game, that's where you plug in healing cooldowns, is when those unavoidable damage events start happening to the raid. So we go to damage taken. We changed taken by friendly over here on the right side. We're going to change that to taken from ability, and it's going to show all the different boss abilities that happen during the fight. Typically, it's going to be some of the top damaging abilities, if not the top damaging ones. But say we're on a boss fight and we don't know which abilities we're looking for. Like we look at this and we go, I don't know what I'm looking for. So what we're going to do is open a new tab, and we're going to go to mythictrap.com. This is where it shows like quick fire boss guides. We're going to go to raid, Lords of Dread, and swap it to healer if we want. And then we're just going to look, and we're going to go, okay, Unto Darkness. When Mal'Ganis reaches 100 energy, both bosses turn into swarms, inflicting massive amount of raid damage over 20 seconds. Cool. So that is going to be either Swarm of Darkness or Swarm of Decay. They're both the same thing, so you can use either one. It doesn't really matter. So there we go. We have Swarm of Decay. And then what's another ability that does unavoidable raid-wide damage on like a, on a window? Because what we're looking for, like let's say we read through all these abilities and we're like, oh, Cloud Carrion does damage to players. Let's look at Cloud Carrion. So I go to here, I go to Cloud Carrion, and it's like, you can't really plan healing cooldowns around this because it's just damage that's happening to the raid all the time. and there's not really big ramp ups like there is here at the end, but that's just because it's the end of the boss fight, and it doesn't happen really anywhere else. Like, you can't plan healing cooldowns around this when the highest amount of damage people are taking is like 17k right here, 19k. But this is 158k on Swarm of Decay. So let's try to find something a little bit different. Let's try Ravenous Hunger. That's like the most damaging ability of the whole raid. Okay, this looks a lot better. This is 110,000. And what you're looking for specifically is things like this, where it's like a giant increase in raid damage and then it disappears. And then a giant increase in raid damage and then it disappears. And you want these gaps in between the boss damage to the raid, because that's what allows you to plan your healing cooldowns. Because now we can look at this and just go, okay, for each set of these things, we need to have some kind of cooldown rolling to protect the raid from all this damage. So if you're planning all your healing cooldowns for like your guild, for instance, you look at this and you just plan to put stuff in all of these major bumps to like cover something on the raid. But if we're just planning by ourselves, we want to plan around this and figure out what is the most deadly versus not the most deadly. So Form of Decay is happening a lot less often, but if you watch any log and if you just look at the damage that the raid is taking, the swarms are way more deadly than these Ravenous Hunger ads. These are the interruptible ads that you have to let cast a certain amount of times before you can kill them. So we need to plan around this. So let's say we are playing Resto Druid. How would we want to plan our cooldowns here as a Resto Druid? So what do we have available to us? We have, let me open a notepad here. We have Flourish, which is a 1 minute and 30 second cooldown. We have Convoke, which should be a 1 minute cooldown if we're Night Fae. And we have Tranquility, which again, we didn't take 2 minute Trank, so it is a 3 minute cooldown. Those are our three main healing cooldowns that we have. So we need to plug these in to different spots in this fight. So the next thing we need to do is figure out how far apart are each of these damage instances to plan our cooldowns around. So we have Swarm of Decay. This is going to happen, let's see, so the first one happens at about 45 seconds into the fight. The second one happens about 3 minutes and 10 seconds into the fight. That's a rough estimate of about like 2 minutes and 30 seconds apart. So let's go ahead and then let's look at the next one. So we have 3:10 is when that one starts. This one starts at 5:35-ish. So yeah, it's pretty close to 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So let's just say Swarm of Decay happens every 2 minutes and 30 seconds, just for the sake of simplicity. All right, and then the next thing that we can do is we can look at, and another thing we could even do, instead of saying 2 minutes and 30 seconds, because it's like kind of, it could be a little less than 2 minutes and 30 seconds in some cases, we could even lower this and just say like, we can't cover this cooldown unless we have something that's like 2 minutes or lower, right? Because if we like say it was 2 minutes and we put 2 minutes and 30 seconds and we had a healing cooldown that was exactly 2 minutes and 30 seconds, it wouldn't be up. Like here at 3:10, we would use it here, but it wouldn't be up actually until like this part right here, which may be detrimental. So let's just go ahead and lower that and just let's just say like we'll just plan for a Swarm of Decay every 2 minutes. Like that's how we'll judge our healing cooldowns. And then we have the Ravenous Hunger, which the first one happens at about 10 seconds in. The second one happens at about 1 minute and 20 seconds in. So that means that these, as we keep looking at them, they are on average 1 minute and 10 seconds apart. So again, we can just cut that down a tiny bit and kind of round it off to 1 minute. So we have a Swarm of Decay every 2 minutes, and we have a Ravenous Hunger ad every 1 minute. So now, how do we plan our cooldowns around this? Well, first of all, we already talked about Swarm of Decay being the most dangerous thing. So what we should do is plan to put as many healing cooldowns because of how long it lasts. It's a 20-second duration, which means that as a Resto Druid, we could literally fit all three of our healing cooldowns into it. And if you watch any fight, like any VOD of people fighting this boss on Mythic or even Heroic, the raid takes a lot of damage during Swarm of Decay. So it is 100% viable to just literally throw every cooldown into each of these Swarm of Decays. So let's just go into it with that. Let's plan to use every cooldown we possibly have for every Swarm of Decay and kind of ignore Ravenous Hunger for now. So I'm going to, let's see, we're going to go ahead and do this. We'll do it the old-fashioned way that I had it set up earlier. Let me do this. This is how I did it in the log review in the Discord. So we're just going to snip this out and then going to make a... All right, so let's start with each of our healing cooldowns. So let's go back here. So let's start with, for instance, Convoke. It's a 1-minute cooldown, so easy enough that can fit into every single Swarm of Decay, no questions asked. So we just go, let's say aqua color is going to be Convoke, right? So we put a Convoke here. We put a Convoke here. Doesn't have to be specific. We're not saying we're going to exactly use it at these times, but it's just the idea of like, you know, when we need to have it available. Then we'll use one there and one right there. Cool. And now Convoke is a 1-minute cooldown, so where else can we fit it? Because obviously we're not going to hold Convoke for 2 minutes and 30 seconds every time. So if we cut that down, that gives us 1 extra Convoke in between each of these. Because say we use it right here, and then we use it again on cooldown as soon as possible, right here at 2 minutes. And then now we can't use it again at 3 minutes, because if we use it at 3 minutes, it's not going to be available for this. So what that already tells me is I could erase this right here, and I can just plan to put 1 Convoke in between each Convoke on the Swarm of Decays. I hope that makes sense. So we can take this and go, we can plan, now we can fit these into the Ravenous Hungers, because there's nothing happening here in the Swarm of Decays. So now we can fit a Convoke somewhere in here, so we can go like, okay, well, we need to use it by, 3 minutes and 30 seconds, so that means it needs to be used somewhere in between 2 minutes and 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Otherwise, it won't be back up when we need it. And we can't use it sooner than 2 minutes because we used it at 1 minute here. So we can plan it right here during this Ravenous Hunger, right? So there we go. And then we plan it again. So we go 3 minutes and 30 seconds, 6 minutes. We can fit it somewhere in between 4:30 and 5 minutes. So let's just plan to hit it at 5 minutes, right when this Ravenous Hunger is starting. Cool. And again, it doesn't have to be super specific. It's just the idea of you're giving yourself, when do you need to use this cooldown by? Like, when is the latest possible time that you can use it? And as long as you have that time in your head, then you just press it when the raid is taking damage, as long as it's before the 5, like here before the 5 minute timer, because you need to have it ready for this Swarm of Decay that's coming up. And then we have this last one. We can use it just right at 7 minutes. Doesn't need to be super specific, so we'll just use it kind of like right here. So there's our Convokes. So as you can see, we alternate our Convokes to where it's 1 on Swarm of Decay, 1 on a Ravenous Hunger, 1 on a Swarm of Decay, 1 on a Ravenous Hunger, 1 on Swarm of Decay, and so on and so forth. And now let's go to our next cooldown. So next we have, let's say Flourish. Flourish is also a 1 minute and 30 second cooldown, which means we can use it for every single Swarm of Decay. So let's go ahead and change this to yellow, and that'll be our Flourish. We want to ideally always use Flourish after Convoke, so let's just make like a mental note of that by putting the line after Convoke. So there's our first Flourish. There's our second Flourish. There's our third. And there's our fourth. And now we ask ourselves the same question. Can we fit a Flourish in between? Because it is a shorter cooldown than 2 minutes and 30 seconds. It's a minute and 30, so that means we used our first one at about a minute, just give or take. So that means it'll come back up at 2:30. So we use it here, but that won't work because now it won't be back up until 4 minutes in the fight, which is after the swarm. So we erase this and go, okay, well, that means that we're just going to have to hold our Flourish and just treat it as if it's a 2 minute and 30 second cooldown ability. And we just use it on each Swarm of Decay. And this is just us brainstorming. This isn't necessarily what is actually going to be best, but this is like my idea of it. And then what we do is we check a log after this of a Resto Druid that we're in, like I said, we're in the log of the Resto Druid that had really high HPS and did this fight on Mythic, so he obviously probably knows what he's doing. So then we'll check where he used his cooldowns and kind of compare notes. And spoiler alert, I already did this in the log review in the Discord, and this is the best way to use the healing cooldowns. So the next thing is our last cooldown, which is Tranquility, 3-minute cooldown. So we will set that one to like a lime green. So that'll be Tranquility. So this is where things get a little bit different, right? Because we need to actually plan. Because it's a 3-minute cooldown, so that means we can't fit it with every Swarm of Decay. So what we could do is, because we already like preface this with, we want to use every single cooldown on Swarm of Decay when we can. So that means we can treat Tranquility as if we're only going to use it on 2 Swarm of Decays in the whole fight. So we choose 2 Swarm of Decays that we feel are the most dangerous, which the more times the boss casts Swarm of Decay, the more damage it does to the raid. You can see a gradual increase in how much damage it's doing through the log. So instead of using it on the first, like, because your first intention might be, okay, well, I have Tranquility available, I'll just press it on the first one, right? I'll just press Trank here and then use it here. But that doesn't necessarily give you an extra use of it. Technically, you could use it here at the end of the fight, but you could argue that, so you could do this totally works. You use Trank on the first one, the third one, and then at the very tail end of the fight, just as like a last second, like, here's an AoE heal to the raid before the fight's over. So that's our first option. The second option is we just hold Tranquility this entire time, or we press it like right on pull pretty much. So we could use it like right here during this first ad, and then we could use it during the second swarm and the last swarm. And then we get the same amount of uses. So all we're doing is just making sure that we're getting the maximum amount of uses of our cooldowns while also covering the things that we already prefaced that we need to cover, which in this case is Swarm of Decay. We need to cover Swarm of Decay with every healing cooldown that we have available, which means that we fit every healing cooldown into Swarm of Decay and then worry about where else to put it. So like this Tranquility, we don't worry about this third Tranquility until we make sure that it is going to still cover the same amount of Swarm of Decays as if we, min-maxed and got as many as possible. So that is the idea. And then now we just compare to what an actual Resto Druid was doing in the fight, which this is what you can do if you just want to bypass all this and just kind of like, if you don't have to think for yourself and can just look at players who are ahead of you in progression, then this is what you would do. You would just do the same thing, damage taken. But the whole explanation of me doing this and making all this and like telling you guys my decision-making process before I show you it is just to give you an idea of like what you're looking for. It's not just like you look at the Resto Druid, you see where he casts his cooldowns and you go, okay, there's where my cooldowns go. It's giving you a reason of why they're pressing their cooldowns there and what is the thought process behind like how do they determine to use their cooldowns, and this is what they do. So we have the damage taken up. We should leave this here. Next, we're going to go to cast, and then we're going to go to our Resto Druid that we're looking at, and then we're just going to follow the same order. So we're looking at those cooldown abilities. So we want to see where he used Tranquility, Convoke, and Flourish. So we'll look at Tranquility. We will look at Convoke. And we will look at Flourish. There we go. So now let's go ahead and look at where he used his stuff, and then we will compare. So we have this here. So what happened? Let's look at Trank first. So he used his first Tranquility here on the second Swarm of Decay and the fourth Swarm of Decay. So then we compare how ours looked. Second Swarm, fourth Swarm. The only thing that's different is that we fit this one here because we saw the timeline and we were like, well, we can fit a free Trank here if we want. Like, if we want to use a third Trank in this fight, we have to press it here or before. Otherwise, this is just, you can't fit it anywhere else in the entire fight to make it work where you get this. So maybe he just decided he didn't need it. Maybe he was doing damage to the bosses. There's a lot of different things, or maybe he just overlooked it and didn't press it. It could be a million different things, but we don't think about it too much. The next thing is, where did he use Convoke? So he lined up a Convoke with the first Swarm, and then at the tail end at 2 minutes during this Ravenous Hunger. And then where was the next Convoke? During a Swarm. Where was the next Convoke? In the middle. Where was the next one? During a Swarm. He followed the exact same pattern. So now let's look at Flourish. Did he use Flourish on cooldown, or did he use it with every Swarm? First one was with the Swarm. Second one with a Swarm and all of his healing CDs. So you can see this one is Flourish, Convoke, Convoke, Flourish. And then we have a solo Convoke just in the middle. And then we have another swarm, which is Trank, Convoke, Flourish. And then in the middle, nothing. And then the next one, again, every cooldown he has, which is Convoke and Flourish. And then just a Convoke by itself to get it on cooldown. And then all 3 cooldowns again for the last swarm. So he followed the exact same pattern of making sure that he's piling as many CDs into the swarms, and the Ravenous Hungers are an afterthought. They're something that you fit after you've already gone, okay, how do I make sure that I get every single available cooldown into each Swarm of Decay? This is what I need to do. Now, where do I have that extra free time to put other cooldowns in other places in the fight? So hopefully that was helpful. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know if there's anything that you think I could do to improve this, or if I missed any points or kind of overstated anything, or if there's anything that was confusing. Feel free to ask questions, or again, please stop by the Discord and feel free to drop a log or a VOD in the new Submit Here channel. It's open to everybody for now until I figure out what I want to do with it, but while we're kind of giving it a test run and I have some free time, I figured it'd be a fun way to kind of get people engaged and interested in learning more about logs. So thank you so much for watching. See you later.